functions of carbohydrates. Which carbohydrates? Not all carbohydrates, friends. The functions of those carbohydrates which are found in the cell membrane, right? So the first function that they importantly play is called the cell recognition. What? Cell recognition. What does it mean? It means that on the surface of the cell membrane there are certain carbohydrates. Let me make it here, friends. For example, if this is a cell, right, and there must be certain carbohydrates on the surface of this cell which will help in recognition of this cell to the other cells, right? If here is another cell comes, right, and he wants to know that either this cell belongs to us or not, right? So these carbohydrates will help them in order to recognize the cell, either it is own cell or the foreign cell, right? So carbohydrates are used for recognition, cell recognition. This is the function. The next function that these carbohydrates play is called the adhesion. Adhesion, right? What is meant by adhesion? If here is one cell, let me erase it. Here are two cells, first one and the second one, right? And epithelial tissues, we know that the cells are closely packed with each other, right? So here are certain carbohydrate molecules which hold the cells together with each other, right? For example, adherine molecules and ecadherine molecules, right? Cadherines and ecadherines are the examples of those carbohydrates which help in adhesion of the cells with each other and adhesion of the cell in the tissue, right? So the second function of carbohydrate is that they help in the adhesion of the cell with each other and with the tissue in which they are found, right? This is the second function. The third function of carbohydrate is the cell to cell signaling. Cell to cell signaling, right? We know that in our body we have a special system that is called immune system, right? So on the surface of all the immune cells we have certain carbohydrates, and these carbohydrates help to signal the other cell in order he wants to bring him towards itself, right? So these carbohydrates are used in the cell to cell signaling. If the cells want to talk with each other, so they will use their carbohydrates in order to talk with one another, right? So this is called cell to cell signaling, right? The fourth function of these carbohydrates is the cell antigen interaction. What is that? The cell and pathogen. Cell and pathogen interaction. What does it mean by this? Look carefully, friends. We have in our body cells, and on the surface of these cells we have certain carbohydrates, and when a pathogen comes, right, this is a pathogen, he has came, and he will enter the cell by binding to these special carbohydrates. When it binds with these special carbohydrates, then the cell will endocytose it. So it means that cell pathogen interaction. So these carbohydrate molecules were used to make interaction between these pathogens and these cells, right? So carbohydrates play their important role in the cell and pathogen interaction, right? Then the next function of these carbohydrates which are found on the surface of the cell membrane are the recognition of blood groups. Recognition of blood groups, right? You know that on the surface of our red blood cells, we have H substance, right? We have H substance, and if with H substance NAGA binds, NAGA, what is NAGA? N-acetyl galactosamine, N-acetyl galactosamine, right? So this NAGA is a carbohydrate, right? And when this with this H substance NAGA binds, the blood group becomes group B, blood group B. And when this with this H substance galactose binds, what? Galactose. So galactose is a carbohydrate, and it helped the RBC in order to recognize itself as blood group A, right? So look, what is the thing which decides the blood groups? The carbohydrates are deciding about the blood groups, so they are used in the recognition of the blood groups. So what is galactose and NAGA? Galactose and NAGA both are carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are used in order to recognize the blood groups, right? Then carbohydrates have their special role in surface receptors for certain hormones. For certain hormones, carbohydrates are used as receptor molecules. These carbohydrates present on the surface of red blood cells and on the surface of every cell, right? And when a special hormone comes and bind with that receptor, right? So the signal is given to the cell, and the cell will take the action according to that order, right? So they are used as surface receptors, right? Certain carbohydrates work as transporters, right? So certain carbohydrates help in transport of different substances along with these channels, right? Along with these channel proteins, we have here certain carbohydrate molecules, and these carbohydrate molecules are used to bind with certain ions and other substances, right? So who catch these ions and these polar substances? The carbohydrates catch them and then transport them, right? So carbohydrates are used as transporters on the surface of cell membrane. Then the add function, carbohydrates are also used in different places as enzymes on the surface of your cell membrane. So carbohydrates also work as enzymes on the surface of our cell membrane, right? So these were some functions which were played by the carbohydrates which are present on the surface of the cell membrane. Friends, we talked about lipids, we talked about proteins, and now we talked about carbohydrates of the cell membrane. In the next lecture, I will discuss about some functions of this cell membrane, that what are the functions of the cell membrane, and then we are finished with the cell membrane. Then we will jump inside the cell and we will see what other structures are present inside the cell. So friends, keep watching Top Lesson for You, and please do share these lectures with your friends. See you then. Allah Hafiz.